Chapter 12. In Pendleton Woods. Pollyanna went to the Ladies' Aid meeting, and she told the ladies about Jimmy Bean, but no one agreed to take him. When she left the meeting, Pollyanna turned her steps towards Pendleton Hill. It had been a hard day, even though it had been vacation, as she called that infrequent days when there was no sewing or cooking lesson. Pollyanna was sure that a walk through the quiet green of Pendleton Woods would do her good. "I don't have to get home till 5:30, she told herself. "It'd be much nicer to go by way of the woods, even if I do have to climb up Pendleton Hill to get there." It was very beautiful in Pendleton Woods, as Pollyanna knew, but today it seemed even more delightful than ever, despite her disappointment over what she must tell Jimmy Bean tomorrow. Suddenly, Pollyanna lifted her head and listened. A dog had barked some distance ahead. A moment later, he dashed towards her, still barking. "Hello, doggie!" Pollyanna snapped her fingers as the dog looked expectantly down the path. She had seen the dog once before, with the man, Mr. John Pendleton. She watched eagerly, but Mr. Pendleton did not appear. The dog was acting strangely. He yelped and ran back and forth in the path ahead. Soon they reached a side path, and down this little dog flew, only to come back at once whining and barking. "That isn't the way home," laughed Pollyanna, keeping to the main path. The little dog seemed frantic now. Back and forth between Pollyanna and the side path he vibrated, barking and whining. At last Pollyanna understood. She turned and she followed him. The little dog dashed madly ahead. Soon Pollyanna came upon the reason for it all. A man was laying motionless at the foot of a steep rock a few yards from the side path. A twig cracked sharply under Pollyanna's foot, and the man turned his head. With a cry of dismay, Pollyanna ran to his side. "Mr. Pendleton, are you hurt?" "Hurt? Oh, no. I'm just taking a fiesta," snapped the man. "See here, what can you do? Have you got any sense?" Pollyanna caught her breath, and then she answered each question. "Why, Mr. Pendleton, I can't do many things, but most of the ladies' aiders said I had real good sense. I heard 'em say so one day. They didn't know I heard, though." The man smiled grimly. There, child, I beg your pardon. It's this confounded leg of mine. Now listen." With some difficulty he reached his hand into his pocket and brought out a bunch of keys, singling out one between his thumb and forefinger. "Straight down the path there, about 5 minutes' walk, is my house. This key opens the side door. When you get into the house, go straight through the hall to the door at the end. On the big desk in the middle of the room is a telephone. Do you know how to use a telephone?" "Oh, yes. Once when Aunt Polly—" "No, never mind Aunt Polly," cut in the man as he tried to move himself a little bit. "Hunt up Dr. Thomas Chilton's number on the card you'll find somewhere around there. It ought to be on the hook down at the side, but it probably won't be. You know a telephone card, I suppose, when you see one?" "Oh, yes, sir. I just love Aunt Polly's, and—" "Tell Dr. Chilton that John Pendleton is at the foot of Little Eagle Ledge in Pendleton Woods with a broken leg. He should come at once with a stretcher and 2 men. Tell him to come by the path from the house." "A broken leg! Oh, Mr. Pendleton, how awful!" shuddered Pollyanna. "I'm so glad I came. Can't I do—" "Yes, you can, but evidently you won't. Will you do what I asked and stop talking?" moaned the man. With a little sob, Pollyanna went. Pollyanna did not stop to look up the patches of blue between the tops of the trees. She kept her eyes on the ground to make sure no twig or stone tripped her hurrying feet. It was not long before she saw the house. She was almost frightened at the great pile of gray stone, with its pillared verandas and imposing entrance. Pausing only a moment, however, she sped across the neglected lawn and around to the side door. Her fingers, stiff from their tight clutch upon the keys, had trouble turning the lock, but at last the heavy carved door swung slowly back. Pollyanna caught her breath. In spite of her haste, she paused and looked fearfully into the dark hall. Her thoughts were in a whirl. This was John Pendleton's mysterious house, the house into which only he entered, the house with, somewhere, a skeleton. Yes, she was expected to enter these frightening rooms by herself and telephone the doctor. With a little cry, Pollyanna ran through the hall to the door at the end and opened it. The room was large and gloomy. Through the west window, the sun threw a shaft of gold across the floor, gleamed on the tarnished brass andirons in the fireplace, and touched the telephone on the desk in the middle of the room. Pollyanna hurriedly tiptoed toward the desk. The telephone card was not on its hook. It was on the floor. But Pollyanna found it and ran her shaking forefinger down through the C's to Chilton. Soon Dr. Chilton himself was on the line. Trembling, Pollyanna delivered her message and answered the doctor's questions. And then she hung up the receiver and drew a long breath of relief. Pollyanna glanced around. She saw crimson draperies, book-lined walls, a littered floor, an untidy desk, countless closed doors, any of which might conceal a skeleton, and dust everywhere. And then she fled back through the hall to the great carved door, still half open. In an incredibly short time, Pollyanna was back in the woods at the man's side. "What is the trouble? Couldn't you get in?" he demanded. Pollyanna opened her eyes wide. "Of course I could. I'm here," she answered. "As if I'd be here if I hadn't got in. And the door will be up as soon as the doctor will be up as soon as possible. He said he knew just where you were, so I didn't stay to show him. I wanted to be with you." "Did you?" smiled the man grimly. "Well, I can't say I admire your taste. I should think you might find more pleasant companions." "Do you mean because you're so cross?" "Thanks for your frankness. Yes." Pollyanna laughed. "But you're only cross outside. You aren't cross inside a bit." "Well, how do you know that?" asked the man. He tried to change the position of his head without moving the rest of his body. "Oh, lots of ways. There, the way you act with the dog," she added, and she pointed to the slender hand that rested on the dog's head. "It's funny how dogs and cats know the inside of folks better than other folks do, isn't it? Say, I'm going to hold your head," she finished abruptly. The man winced and groaned once while the change was being made, but in the end he found Pollyanna's lap a welcome substitute for the rocks on which his head had lain before. "Well, that is better," he murmured. He did not speak again for some time. Pollyanna wondered if he were asleep. She did not think he was. He looked as if his lips were tight shut to keep back moans of pain. Pollyanna almost cried as she looked at his strong body lying there so helpless. Minute by minute, the time passed. The sun dropped lower and the shadows grew deeper under the trees. Pollyanna sat so still she hardly seemed to breathe. A bird alighted fearlessly within reach of her hand. A squirrel whisked his bushy tail on a branch almost under her nose, keeping his bright eyes on the motionless dog. At last, the dog pricked up his ears and gave a short bark. Soon, 3 men appeared carrying a stretcher. A tall, kind-eyed man walked forward cheerily. Pollyanna knew him by sight as Dr. Chilton. "Well, my little lady, playing nurse?" "Oh, no, sir," smiled Pollyanna. "I've only held his head. I haven't given him a mite of medicine, but I'm glad I was here." "So am I," nodded the doctor, as he turned his attention to the injured man. Chapter 13. Just a Matter of Jelly. Pollyanna was a little late for supper on the night of the accident to John Pendleton, but as it happened, she did not get a scolding. Nancy met her at the door. "Well, if it ain't glad to see you," she sighed. "It's 6:30. "I know," admitted Pollyanna anxiously, "but I'm not to blame, and I don't think even Aunt Polly will say I am either." "Well, she won't have a chance," retorted Nancy with satisfaction. "She's gone." "Gone?" gasped Pollyanna. "You don't mean that I've driven her away?" "No," answered Nancy. Her cousin died suddenly down in Boston, and she had to go. She won't be back for 3 days. Now I guess we're glad, all right. We'll be keeping house together, just you and me all that time. Pollyanna looked shocked. Glad? Oh, Nancy, when it's a funeral? Oh, but it wasn't the funeral I was glad for, Miss Pollyanna. It was... Nancy stopped abruptly. A twinkle came into her eye. Why, Miss Pollyanna, you're the one who taught me to play the game, she said. Pollyanna puckered her forehead into a troubled frown. I can't help it, Nancy, she argued with a shake of her head. There are some things that it isn't right to play the game on, and funerals is one of them. There's nothing in a funeral to be glad about. Nancy chuckled. We could be glad it isn't ours, she observed. But Pollyanna didn't hear. She had begun to tell of the accident. The next afternoon, Pollyanna met Jimmy Bean. Of course, Jimmy was disappointed that the Ladies' Aid didn't have a home for him. Well, I'll write to the Ladies' Aiders out west about you, said Pollyanna. Jimmy's face brightened. Do you think they would take me? He asked. Of course they would. You wait. I'll write 'em. All right, but don't forget to say I'll work for my board and keep, put in Jimmy. And I suppose I better stay where I am till you hear. Of course, nodded Pollyanna. Then I'll know where to find you. It was about a week after the accident in Pendleton Woods that Pollyanna said to her aunt one morning, Aunt Polly, may I take Mrs. Snow's calf-foot jellies this week to someone else? I'm sure Miss Snow wouldn't mind. Dear me, Pollyanna, what are you up to now? Sighed her aunt. Nothing, Aunt Polly, that you would mind, I'm sure. You let me take jelly to her, so I thought you would to him, just this once. You see, his broken leg won't last forever. What are you talking about, Pollyanna? Pollyanna stared, and then her face relaxed. Oh, I forgot you didn't know. You see, it happened while you were gone. It was the same day you went, and I found him in the woods, you know, and I had to unlock his house and telephone for the doctor and hold his head and everything. And then I came away and haven't seen him since. But when Nancy made the jelly for Miss Snow this week, I thought how nice it would be if I could take it to him instead of her, just this once. Aunt Polly, may I? Well, yes, I suppose so, said Miss Polly, a little wearily. Who did you say he was? The man. I mean, Mr. John Pendleton. Miss Polly almost sprang from her chair. John Pendleton? Yes, maybe you know him. Miss Polly did not answer. Instead, she asked, Do you know him? Pollyanna nodded. Oh, yes, he always speaks and smiles. Now. He's only cross outside, you know. I'll go and get the jelly, finished Pollyanna, already halfway across the room. Pollyanna, wait. Miss Polly's voice was suddenly very stern. I've changed my mind. I would prefer that Miss Snow had the jelly today, as usual. That is all. You may go now. Pollyanna's face fell. Oh, but Aunt Polly, she can always be sick and have things, you know. But his is just a broken leg, and broken legs get better. He's had it a whole week now. Yes, I remember. I heard Mr. John Pendleton had met with an accident, said Miss Polly, a little stiffly. But I do not care to be sending jelly to John Pendleton, Pollyanna. I know, he is cross outside, admitted Pollyanna sadly. So I suppose you don't like him, but I wouldn't say you sent it. I'd say it was me. I like him. I'd be glad to send him jelly. Miss Polly began to shake her head again, and then suddenly she stopped, and she asked in a quiet voice, Does he know who you are, Pollyanna? The little girl sighed. I reckon not. I told him my name once, but he never calls me it. Does he know where you live? Oh, no, I never told him that. Then he doesn't know you're my niece? I don't think so. For a moment there was silence. Miss Polly was looking at Pollyanna with eyes that did not seem to see her at all. The little girl shifted impatient from one small foot to the other side, and then Miss Polly roused herself with a start. "Very well, Pollyanna," she said at last in a strange voice. "You may take the jelly to Mr. Pendleton as your own gift, but understand, I did not send it. Be very sure that he does not think I do." "Thank you, Aunt Polly," cried Pollyanna as she flew through the door.